afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know how this reads in Portuguese, but what it should be saying is Collete and I come to meet you with the best wishes from all health colleagues in the United Kingdom. It's a great honour for us to be here at this very important conference and to tell you how we intend to improve oral health and reduce inequalities in England. Now, as has been said, for 6 years I worked with the UK government developing oral health policies before leaving and helping local health services in developing those policies. My successor at the Department of Health, Sue Gregory, unfortunately can't be here this afternoon, and so I will be presenting her presentation to you as well. And following that, Collete Bridgman will be telling you and bringing you up to date in terms of how we're implementing oral health at a local level within the new contracts that we are developing for NHS dentists in England. Oops. So, firstly, I'm going to tell you about how we developed our oral health strategy, which we called Choosing Better Oral Health, and I'll explain later why we called it that. It's 6 years old now, but despite changes in the government and changes in political parties in the government, it is still the strategy for England, and it still drives our thinking in terms of improving oral health and reducing inequalities. I will then talk about Sue Gregory's work in developing an evidence-based guidance toolkit for oral health at a practice level. And then Collete will bring you up to date in terms of how we're implementing that within England. Now, firstly, of course, there are big differences between our two countries. The maps here are of population density. And you can see straight away that Brazil's 192 million population is concentrated around the coastal area predominantly. Whilst in England, on the right-hand side, you can see that population density is spread across the whole country. The dark areas are where there's high levels of population density. And that's in London, down towards the bottom right-hand side of England. That's where the Olympics are, of course, at the moment. And then in areas up in the north of England, where Collete practices in Manchester and Liverpool and Leeds, the big industrial cities in the country. Now, of course, Brazil covers an area of some 8.5 million square kilometres, while England covers just 150,000 kilometres. So your country is 65 times bigger than England, but as a population, only 4 times bigger than England. So if we take the country as a whole, there are on average in England 400 people per square kilometre, compared with just 26 in Brazil. However, of course, very few people in Brazil live in your rural areas, your rainforests. And so if we look at the urban areas, it's probably very similar to that which we have in England. And of course, it's these urban areas that have the highest health needs in general and have the highest inequalities. And it's these urban areas where young people migrate. So there are differences between our two countries, but I hope that it will be helpful to tell you firstly how we developed our oral health strategy in England and what were its key principles. And this is it. This is what it looks like. We've got a copy here. It's called Choosing Better Oral Health. So what was our vision? What was our vision for this strategy? Well, firstly, we spent some time talking to people working in the health service, talking to academics in our dental schools, talking to our specialists in dental public health, in oral health, talking to people, the population, and of course consulting with our health ministers in terms of policy and what they actually wanted. And our vision was to work towards developing a caries-free child population. It was working towards reducing oral health inequalities in England, improving access to dental care for everyone, motivating the dental workforce in terms of prevention, and importantly, creating a service based on health rather than treatment. A very ambitious exercise. So we had our vision then. What were our aims? What were the aims of the strategy? Well, firstly, we wanted to enable the population of England to make healthy choices. Healthy choices in terms of the food they ate, healthy choices in terms of oral hygiene. We wanted to make sure that they had the information to make these choices. And so at the heart of the strategy was essentially to make sure that we provided them with the information that they needed. And this is important because amongst decision makers, integrating oral health into general health is important because certainly in England, oral health has been seen to be a very low priority. In fact, it's quite surprising to hear people talk about the primary care system in England without actually mentioning dentistry and oral health. So we wanted to make sure that oral health was there, and we felt that the way we could do that was to link it with all the other key issues like heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and particularly obesity, as I'll explain later. And so we wanted to try and link oral health to these common risk factors that affect all these other important diseases, and therefore raise the profile of oral health. Now, I want to say a little bit about oral health in England to set the scene. And firstly, our oral health is generally improving. In fact, there have been major improvements over the years, as these slides show. Now, if you look at the first graph, that's the one on the upper left-hand side with 3 lines going down. These are the results of our national surveys of children over 30 years, from 1973 to 2003. And you can see, because the lines are going down, that there have been major improvements in the levels of dental decay over this time, particularly amongst the 12-year-olds, which is the pink line in the middle, and the 15-year-olds, the green line at the top. Now, in 1975, fluoride toothpaste was introduced into the United Kingdom, and so I'm sure that that helped to contribute to this great improvement in oral health. If you look at the bar graph at the bottom of the slide, you can see most of the countries in Europe. And the bar on the right, which is coloured yellow, is England. England has the best oral health of any country in Europe. And the WHO have mapped this out, and so you can see that the United Kingdom, Germany, Holland, Belgium, and Denmark, by the fact they've got pale colours, have the best oral health. The lighter colour means best oral health. But if you move to the east and the south, things get far worse. So you can see that in our new eastern entry countries into the European Union, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, there is very, very poor oral health. And in fact, Portugal is not very good either. So we're fortunate. We have very good oral health in terms of 12-year-old children. Now, we can, in fact, track these improvements right back to 1937-39, with surveys undertaken then. And these bar charts show the prevalence of decay-free 5-year-old children from 1937 to 1993. And you can see that there has been an improvement, a great increase in the number of children that are decay-free in terms of 5-year-olds. But what this bar chart also shows, which is terribly important, is what we call the cultural lag between the children from parents who are manual workers or unemployed, which are the yellow lines, and the improvement in terms of children from professional and middle class backgrounds, which are the green lines. And you can see there's still a difference between the two, although in terms of improvement, both groups of children have been improving. So that's children in a nutshell. So what about adults? Now, if you look at the graph, the bar chart at the top, on the right-hand side of the slide, this, from again our national surveys, charts the improvements in adult oral health across years, from 1968 to 1998. And this is a percentage, this graph represents a percentage of adults with no teeth, who are edentulous, with no teeth. And you can see, again, there have been major improvements with about 37% of adults in 1968, that's a third of the population who had no teeth at all. Their teeth had been taken out, down to 1998 when there was 11%. Now, not shown on this graph is the latest survey, which was carried out in 2009, and we now have just 6% of our population who are edentate, who have no teeth at all. And of course, as they get older and eventually die, they will be replaced by younger people who definitely have their teeth and healthy teeth as well. So, what are the trends? Well, for most adults then, dental health has improved dramatically over 50 years. In the post-war years, oral health of the nation was very poor and disease was very common. People did not expect their teeth to last for life. But expectations have changed, and as I said, the percentage of people with no teeth has dropped from 37 to 6%, and the proportion of people with 18 or more standing teeth that's untreated, decay-free, has increased from 27% in 1978 to 53% in 2009. But importantly, although we're talking about caries then, there has been no significant improvement in periodontal health. So oral health has and is improving in England, but we still have major inequalities across the country, as this slide shows from our very latest survey of 12-year-old children. Now, the map shows all the local areas, all 152 areas, local areas in England of the National Health Service. And it maps out the average DMFT of 12-year-old children in these areas. The paler the colour, the better the oral health. There are some areas that are coloured white, and that's because, for whatever reason, they didn't submit any data. But most of the areas did submit data. And I think what you can see there is the further north you go in England, the darker the colour, the worse the oral health. And as you go south, the better the oral health. And so in our major industrial areas, Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, Newcastle, oral health is particularly poor. And the bar graph at the bottom, which really doesn't look like a bar graph, but it is, because every single one of our 152 primary care trusts, our local NHS, are represented there. That shows the range in terms of DMFT. The red line across the graph, is the England average. And so you can see that some are worse than the England average, some are better than the England average, and the range in our regions is from 1.07 in the north to 0.55 in the southeast. This is still very good in terms of what's happening in Europe. But if we could try to reduce those inequalities, things would be even better. And the final graph I'm going to show you, which I quite like actually, is a bar chart of 5-year-old children in 2005-2006, surveyed across the country, and it's split into the various components of DMF. So the top part of each bar, which is green hatched area, is the filled teeth component. The blue part is the missing teeth component, that's missing teeth extracted because of decay. And the bottom part, the pink part, is untreated decay. And the right-hand side is our country, Wales and Scotland, who have the worst oral health in the United Kingdom. And on the left-hand side, you have Southeast England, the rural area, commuters, wealthy commuters into London, which has the best oral health in England. And I just want to point out one thing, that the bar next to the southeast, on the right, on the left-hand side, is the West Midlands, a big industrialised area around Birmingham, our second biggest city, has really good oral health. And why does it have good oral health? Because it's fluoridated, and has been fluoridated since 1964. So really, Birmingham should be up with Manchester and the other areas in terms of industrial areas, but because it's fluoridated, it has really good oral health. Now, before we published our National Oral Health Strategy, the government of the day published its General Public Health Strategy, which is, the front cover of which is the young girl holding a box full of healthy food, and they called that Choosing Health. And that was to emphasize the fact that the strategy was about making people and giving people information to improve their own health, rather than the health service telling them what to do, giving them choices, giving them information so that they could improve their own oral health. Now, we followed this principle in oral health. In fact, actually, we were told to follow this principle in oral health by our ministers, and so that's why we called our strategy Choosing Better Oral Health. And as I said, although it was produced under a Labour government, and we have a different government now, it is still the strategy for England. Now, in broad terms, what we wanted the population of England to understand was that there is only one cause of tooth decay, sugar, and therefore improving diet, reducing sugars, will help reduce dental decay. We wanted the population of England to understand that if they improve their oral hygiene, they will reduce the risk of periodontal disease. We wanted them to understand that fluorides play a major part in reducing decay. So we wanted to promote the use of fluoride and certainly support water fluoridation. We wanted them to understand that tobacco has an impact on periodontal disease, and also with, or indeed without alcohol, has an impact on oral cancer. We wanted to reduce facial injuries. We wanted to train our workforce that had been so used to just treatment and were paid for treatment. We wanted to train them in the principles of prevention. And finally, we wanted to recognize the role that research and development played, not only in our academic universities, but also in our friends working in the commercial oral health product industry. Above all else, quite critical to this was we wanted our local health service, all those 152 little areas, to develop their own oral health strategies based on the principles within the national strategy. Now, key to improving oral health is a recognition that the risks for having poor oral health are shared with many other chronic diseases, and therefore we must not see oral health in isolation from these other diseases. And our oral health plan there majors very much on what we call the common risk factor approach. And this was key to everything that we produced. And this approach is about how common diseases often have more than one etiological impact, which this diagram on the right-hand side of this slide tries to show from earlier work by Aubrey Shire and Richard Watt, which I know that a few people in the audience know Aubrey and Richard. So if we take diet, for example, at the top on the left-hand side of the diagram, this impacts, as you can see, if you follow the arrows, it impacts on obesity, it impacts on cancer, it impacts on heart disease, and of course it impacts on dental caries. So diet is a common risk factor for all these health problems, and improving diet, say to reduce obesity, will have a knock-on effect on all these other areas. And our government is spending a lot of money in trying to reduce the obesity in the UK. So perhaps oral health will have some share and benefit from that work. Likewise, again at the top, on the right-hand side though this time, reducing smoking will of course have an impact on cancer, respiratory disease, heart disease, but also the incidence of periodontal disease as well. So whilst oral health is not always ranked in general public health terms very highly compared with, say, cancer or heart disease, focusing on these high priority areas that have common risks will have an impact on oral health. Now, all of us here, I'm sure, would agree that if we can reduce sugar intake in food and drink and the frequency with which we consume these items, this will have a major impact on oral health. And this approach couldn't be more appropriate in terms of our government's policy, because in the United Kingdom, like many countries, we have now a major obesity epidemic. And I'll take you through this slide. Obesity prevalence in 2 to 10-year-old children in the United Kingdom was 9.6% in 1995. In 2002, it was 15%. And at present, 30%, 1/3 of our children are overweight. In 2020, if these trends continue in the United Kingdom, 30% of girls and 20% of boys will be clinically obese. That's only 8 years from now. And by 2050, if the current trends continue, then 95% of the United Kingdom population will be overweight. They will have a BMI greater than 25. And so we wanted a message. And the message is that sugar in food and drink has no nutritional benefit. It delivers empty calories, it causes obesity, and it also causes tooth decay. And of course, this isn't a problem just confined to the United States and Western Europe. I'm afraid the same epidemic, as you're well aware, has reached Brazil as well, as you can see from this slide of 3 studies across the years from 1973 up to 1997. And you can see the increase there, particularly the high amount of obesity in women compared with men, but the rates are continuing as well. So, given world obesity levels, it's very strange that the organisers of the world's greatest sporting event, happening as I speak in London, have accepted money from sponsors who, by the very nature of their products, help to cause overweight, obesity, and oral health problems. So, is London 2012 a healthy Games? Well, Cadbury's is the major producer of chocolate and confectionery in the United Kingdom. It's owned now by American company Kraft Foods, and it's worked its way into sponsoring events and athletes. This is Rebecca Adlington, down at the bottom, winner of 2 swimming gold medals in Beijing for Great Britain. Hopeful this time round, but has just got a bronze medal. No gold medals. And as you can see behind her, she is being sponsored by Cadbury's. I don't need to say anything to you at all about Coca-Cola. If the sugar in these drinks doesn't decay your teeth, then the carbonic acid will etch them away. And finally, McDonald's. This restaurant is the largest McDonald's restaurant in the world. And where is it? Yes, on the Olympic Park in London. The good news, or at least hopefully it's good news, is that I looked at your website for Rio de Janeiro in 2016, and the only official sponsors I could find on your website were Nissan cars. Now, perhaps not very good for the environment, but I don't think they're loaded with sugar and fat. But I would call on all of you to do what you can to ensure that Rio de Janeiro is a healthy Games, that your sponsors are health-promoting people. It will be very difficult because you will need a lot of money to run the Olympic Games, and it is the Coca-Colas, it's the McDonald's who have the money and will certainly come in and offer money to the sponsors. But please try to make Rio de Janeiro healthier in terms of sponsorship than London. So our message, as this picture from our strategy shows, is we must help people to choose healthy foods and drinks. So any all health policy will of course include increasing the availability of fluoride. And our strategy was no different. We wanted to see an increase in community or public health fluoride programs. Currently in the United Kingdom, just 10% of the population drinks fluoridated water, as I've shown, mainly in Birmingham, and you've seen the impact of that. But it's not easy. And indeed, across Europe, there's a lot of opposition to water fluoridation, and we have really not been very successful in the United Kingdom at all. England and Ireland, though, are the only areas in Europe where water fluoridation is practiced, and I have to say it's extremely unlikely that we will see any other countries in Europe take up water fluoridation. Opposition to fluoridation has infiltrated the European Parliament with sensational but wholly inaccurate claims about the safety of fluoridation. I'm very envious of what you've achieved in Brazil. Congratulations. I understand 65% of your population is fluoridated, and you really, in terms of people, are only second to the United States in terms of the number of people that drink fluoridated water, which has to have an impact. Okay, so what are we going to do in the United Kingdom? Very difficult in terms of water fluoridation, but what we've majored on is fluoride toothpaste programs. And with the support of major toothpaste manufacturers, to whom we are really grateful, as you can see, the toothpaste on this slide, local health service programs are in place to provide free fluoride toothpaste to children in localities of highest need. Another area where the common risk factor approach comes into play is tobacco and alcohol control, and we want our oral health teams to work closely with tobacco cessation teams and provide advice on smoking cessation. And in 2007, just before England developed its law to ban smoking in public places, I commissioned a working group to publish guidance for dental practices. This was led by Professor Richard Watt from University College, and we called it Smoke-Free and Smiling. And a copy of this went out to every dental practice in the country. And finally, reducing dental facial injuries. Our broad objective was to increase the availability of mouth shields in contact sports, and importantly, to follow our colleagues in Wales in reducing the amount of facial traumatic injury as a result of alcoholic misuse. And that, I don't think, has been taken forward. But Wales has a really good programme to try to reduce the damage caused to facial injuries in fights that occur because people have drunk too much alcohol. And as well as our general strategy, there were two other strategies. This one, Delivering Better Oral Health, which I'll talk about in a moment, and Sue Gregory, who replaced me at the Department of Health, was chair of that working group. And this one, Valuing People's Oral Health, a good practice guide for improving oral health of disabled children and adults, launched in Liverpool in 2007, and my colleague Collete chaired the working group that developed that work, looking specifically at disabled children and adults. So my conclusions as far as oral health and the strategy is concerned is we have successes and we need development. Most local health services now have their own oral health strategy. These little areas have their own oral health strategy focusing on what they need to do in their areas. Oral health, as you've seen, is continuing to improve. We're developing a dental service based on prevention as a priority, as Collete will talk about. Improving oral health of young children is a high priority of ministers in the present government, and delivering better oral health, our oral health workforce, our oral health guidance to practices is in fact being used by dentists. But we still have poor diet, we still have high sugar intake, it's still endemic, particularly in our poorest areas. And the percentage drinking fluoridated water has not increased at all. Inequalities in oral health, as I've shown, still exist, and it is really, there's been no significant improvement in periodontal disease at all. So that's the story of our strategy. And I now want to go on to present the work of Sue Gregory, who replaced me as Deputy Chief Dental Officer for England. And I asked her to lead a group before she moved into the Department of Health to develop a preventive toolkit, and you've already seen that, called Delivering Better Oral Health. And that's what it looks like. You'll see lots of pictures of this coming up, and also in Collette's presentation as well, because it is actually at the heart of what we're trying to do at practice level to improve oral health. Now, my remit to the group was to deliver guidance that had simple, easy to understand messages, that had very concise information. Importantly, that advice was based on scientific evidence, that it was very practical and easy to use. It had good references to fluoride strengths in toothpaste and the use of sugar-free medicines, and it had clear links with healthy eating. It was integrated with the program around healthy eating. So these are the key areas that the working group led by Sue looked at. They looked at the principles of toothbrushing. They looked in all these areas. They looked at the scientific evidence of how to brush teeth, increasing fluoride availability, what was the most accurate healthy eating advice, identifying sugar-free medicines, what best to improve periodontal health, stop smoking advice, accessing alcohol misuse support, and the prevention of erosion. And the principles behind the publication were that all guidance had to be supported by scientific evidence. Obviously, the stronger the better. It had to be in a format that could be updated to include new evidence as it occurs. This is the latest version of Delivering Better Oral Health, and it's in a ring-bind folder, so we can insert new evidence as it becomes available. It had to maximize the potential benefits of prevention, but most importantly, it was a practice toolkit. It was to be used at dental practice level, and it was about improving health at dental practice level. But all the guidance had to be in line with wider health messages. And it was focused for the whole dental team, not just dentists, but everybody else working in the dental team. And in the guidance, as you will see, we've classified the evidence. Now, type 1 evidence at the top in red of this pyramid is the strong evidence from at least one systematic review of multiple well-designed, randomized, control trials. The Cochrane reviews are an example of that. Type 2 evidence, next down, strong evidence from at least one properly designed randomized controlled trial. Type 3, from well-designed trials without randomization. Type 4, well-designed non-experimental studies. And at the very bottom, type 5 evidence, opinions of respected authorities based on clinical evidence. So I've just taken a few pages out of the out of Delivering Better Oral Health to show you, and I'll just talk about one in particular so you get the feel for how it works. And this is the prevention of caries in children aged 7 years and above. And remember, this has gone out to dental practices. And at the top, let's look at the lighter yellow area. And on the left-hand side, you can see we're talking about all children and young adults. And then the advice that we give from the top down is to brush twice daily, brush last thing at night, use fluoridated toothpaste, spit out and not rinse, and frequency of sugary food and drink should be reduced. And then the third column down, you can see it says EB. That's the evidence, going back to what I said before. If it has got a 1, it is the strongest evidence that we can possibly find. So you can see that brush twice daily is very strong, and the use of fluoridated toothpaste, and here at 1350 parts per million fluoride or above, is very strong. The next column is what should dentists do? Well, what dentists should do is to apply fluoride varnish to teeth twice yearly. And that is incredibly strong evidence, type 1 evidence supported by systematic reviews. And the level further down, which is the darker yellow, that's for children giving concern, where we think there's a real problem. And so what happens there is the dentists apply the top part, that in light yellow that I've just explained, but in addition to that, we recommend that dentists recommend to their patients use of fluoride mouthwashes and the use of an oscillating, rotating power toothbrush. Again, you can see if you look to the column that says EB, very, very strong type 1 evidence as far as that's concerned. What should dentists be doing? The professional intervention, well, you can see towards the right-hand side at the bottom, fissure sealing, fluoride varnish, rather than just twice yearly, 3 to 4 times yearly. For those with really active decay, prescribe high fluoride level toothpaste, and obviously investigate diet. And you can see again the strength there, really strong evidence supported by systematic reviews. So I've taken you through that slide, but the others that I've chosen are very similar. You can see we have prevention of caries in adults, similar kind of slide, prevention of periodontal disease, and prevention of oral cancer, all in the same format and all in this book. And if evidence changes at all, if we get more systematic reviews or more evidence, we can take the pages out and send new pages to dentists working in practice. So I think this document is actually a world first in terms of providing advice to dentists. I'll just take you through a section which is Principles of Toothbrushing for Oral Health. I've chosen the bit which is about children up to 3 years, and again you can see that our advice here is supervised brushing, only a smear of toothpaste, but a smear of toothpaste containing no less than 1,000 part per millions of fluoride, and obviously not allowing children to lick or eat the toothpaste. One of the issues that came out right at the beginning was that parents started to ask about the strength of fluoride in their toothpaste. And this page contains a list of all the common toothpaste used in England with the parts per million of fluoride alongside. And we had to change this for the second edition because our toothpaste manufacturers took on board the fact that we were not recommending toothpaste with less than 1,000 parts per million of fluoride, even in our fluoridated areas. because anything less than 1,000 parts per million just doesn't work. And so our two main toothpaste manufacturers, SmithKline and Colgate, reformulated all their toothpaste for children, and it now contains no less than 1,000 parts per million. You can see on this slide that Crest milk teeth had only 250 parts per million. That is now off the market, and Crest is now in the UK selling toothpaste with 1,000 parts per million. Now, of course, this isn't the case across Europe. There are different formulations across Europe, but the toothpaste manufacturers in the UK have taken on board the systematic evidence that we were able to show. So finally, I just wanted to give you examples of how the evidence contained in this guidance were assessed by the working group. And Sue has chosen an example of how the working group looked at the evidence on the effectiveness of different strengths of fluoride in toothpaste, the concentration, the strengths of fluoride in toothpaste. And so the working group looked at all the research that had been done into this, which you can see in all those slides there, all those lines there, and all the researchers on the right-hand side. If you look at the yellow line, that's the second one down from the top, you can see that that study, for example, compared the effectiveness of toothpaste with 1,000, 1,500 and 2,500 parts per million of toothpaste. And as the slope goes down, then the improvement or the reduction in dental decay increases. And as the fluoridation concentration increases, then this line shows there's clearly a reduction in dental decay, which is important. So that was one bit of evidence that they looked at. How does concentration of fluoride in toothpaste affect dental decay? Really important. But another bit of evidence they looked at was the impact of concentration, that's the amount of fluoride in toothpaste, and what impact does this have on fluorosis? And Bentley in 1999 looked at this impact of concentration on potential fluorosis. And here you can see if we increase both the concentration of fluoride in toothpaste, and here we're going up from 450 parts per million that he looked at to 1,450 parts per million, which is most of the population buying toothpaste in supermarkets in the United Kingdom will have that. You can see that, in fact, if you look at the left-hand column with just a little pea-shaped amount of toothpaste, the amount of fluoride ingested goes up from 0.02 to 0.05, a very small increase indeed. But if you look to the right-hand side of the chart, if you have a complete smear of toothpaste across your toothbrush, then it's 0.33 to 1.02, so quite an increase in the amount of fluoride ingested. And so in terms of fluoride ingested, there's a 20 times 20 increase in the amount of fluoride ingested if you actually move from a little pea-shaped amount to actually a full cover of toothpaste, which I'm sure you've probably seen some of your toothpaste manufacturers in their advertising spreading toothpaste across the whole of the toothbrush. And so what we're saying is, from this evidence, providing you use a small amount of toothpaste on your toothbrush, increasing the strength of fluoride in the toothpaste up to 1450 actually does not have a major impact on ingested fluoride and therefore on fluorosis. What about the evidence of fluoride varnish use? Well, Marino in 2002 undertook a Cochrane systematic review into the strength of evidence on varnish, and she noted that in 3 studies of over 1,000 children, there was a 33% reduction in decayed, missing and filled surfaces in deciduous teeth. Because it's a Cochrane evaluation, as I put on the slide, that is type 1, really strong evidence. And we also have fairly recent type 1 strength evidence again on the use of fissure sealants, showing significant reduction in caries after 4.5 years of being of teeth being sealed in 5 to 10-year-old children. And so all this evidence was not only produced in the booklet, but we also produced it on a CD-ROM, and the recommendations are now available to all dentists in England. And I think, in conclusion, Sue, if she was here, would want to say that by taking forward the policies in our national strategy at a population level and ensuring that dental practices work at putting prevention into practice, we really should have a major impact on inequalities in oral health, which I've shown you still exist despite our improving oral health. And so it's really important that dentists now feel rewarded for being preventive focused. For many years since 1948, when dentistry moved into the National Health Service, they were paid on a system by which they got rewarded for treatment. That is now finishing. We are moving to a system where dentists will be paid by capitation, the number of people they look after, and in terms of quality, we will want to see that they have incorporated a lot of the messages that I've shown you today in terms of preventive practice. So I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Collete. Collete works in Manchester, which has, as I've said, the worst oral health in England. It has the best football teams in England, probably in the world. Sorry, perhaps I shouldn't have said that, and we're in Brazil, aren't we? But certainly very good football teams. And so Colette's going to tell you about the work that she's been undertaking with the Department of Health in terms of implementing and bringing prevention into practice, and also work that she's undertaking in the City of Manchester. Colette. We just a few seconds while we change the slides over.
Obrigada, Dr. Tony.